a deliberately planned false flag or whether it is accidental or a blowback or an unintended consequence, it's always used to expand the state.
Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. I've personally been buying gold and silver from JM Bullion for over 2 years. They offer the best prices over spot that I can find, and I've never had a problem with an order. If you're looking to trade in some of your fiat paper for real money, check out jmbullion.com today. Today's guest is Sam Wheat. Sam is a law enforcement officer in one of the most exciting markets in the country, Southern California. Sam, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Mark.
Now, how long have you been employed as a law enforcement officer?
Over 8 years, and I've been with 2 different agencies, one of a middle-sized city agency, and then another large agency in Southern California.
And what made you decide to take that career path?
It's actually something I just fell into, was working, kind of regular jobs in my early 20s, and saw an ad to become a dispatcher, and saw that the pay was good, et cetera, et cetera. When I was going through the hiring process, the human resources person said, hey, we're hiring cops. And I said, well, don't you need some sort of training for that sort of thing? And they said, well, yes, but we'll train you. So next thing I know, 4 months later, I'm hired as a cop. So I don't have that, my dad was a cop, my grandpa was a cop, and this is all I've ever wanted to do mentality. So I kind of see it from a different perspective as opposed to a lot of the other guys that I work with.
So you're not like Tom Selleck in Blue Bloods?
No, not yet.
Is it pretty much what you expected?
I had no idea what to expect. A lot of the guys before they get hired, go on ride-alongs, they scout out different departments, get to know all of it. I didn't know a thing. So I was kind of an open book when I started, and it's a good job, but I quickly started to have a general dislike for the authoritarian role that we take. It's necessary in certain aspects of the job, but it's employed over the entire spectrum of the job where it really doesn't need to be, and that's something that kind of grinds my gears a little bit.
Don't you feel like that the leadership is trying to maintain the integrity of the mission to protect and serve?
In California especially, I can't speak to any other states, but in California and the agencies that I've worked for, it's very political. So, the chief of police for a city, he's an at-will employee, and he can be canned at any time by the city council. The sheriff of the county is an elected official. So, the sheriff, the chief of police, they're looking to please their constituents, please the city council, whatever the hot button issue is of the month, whatever is politically important, those are the areas where they're going to focus their policing efforts, so to speak. So, and kind of off topic, but also in regards to the politics of policing, you'll see a lot of political candidates locally on their sign will say, supported by local police and fire, and the regular citizens, oh, great, let's vote for this guy. But what they don't realize is that's just code for this political candidate is going to cave to the police and fire union to give them a killer contract. That's all that means. It doesn't mean anything that, what political candidate is going to put up a sign that says, we don't like cops, we like criminals. So just be aware whenever you see those signs for political candidates and read between the lines.
I don't know. I think the mayor of New York would probably have that campaign slogan.
But, yeah, well, when you're in the People's Democratic Republic of New York, that's to be expected.
Yeah. No, I'd say most people, even those concerned with militarization, militarization of the police, like myself, are strong supporters of constitutional law enforcement, do you feel that leadership consistently reminds officers that the public's on their side?
I would say the top leadership, that's kind of their mantra. They're not out there with the line level officers, but when you get down to the lower levels, sergeant and patrol cop, you'll hear in briefing every day, and even from the academy, we're indoctrinated with the idea of officer safety, which, obviously is important. This is a dangerous job. There's things you need to be aware of, but we're given that idea that, we could be killed at any moment by any member of the public. And, you always have to have that, quote unquote, healthy paranoia is what, I've heard it as. And, what people don't realize, and even, cops I work with, is law enforcement isn't even in the top 10 for deadliest jobs in America. Commercial fishermen, logging, lineman, electrical worker, construction, they have more casualties and fatalities every year percentage-wise than law enforcement does. It's just they don't make the news, et cetera, et cetera. So I think law enforcement officers have been given kind of an unhealthy paranoia of when dealing with the public. You can pretty much tell somebody that you're going to have to put on your cop hat with, and somebody you can, put on your kid gloves with. But here in California, it's pretty much cop hat all the time because, hey, anybody in the public could kill you. And I think that's probably, maybe a bit conspiracy theorist, I don't know, but, somebody somewhere is making sure that cops are dividing themselves from the general public and, setting ourselves apart.
Huh, that's really interesting, especially, since you mentioned sort of the rhetoric that's behind it, and then the fact that it's not one of the most, or not in the top 10 most dangerous jobs. It brings to mind statistics between the amount of people that die from terrorism in America compared to the statistics of the amount of people that die from lightning strikes in America, which you're thousands of times more likely to die from lightning than terrorism in America. But of course, terrorism's the one that gets hyped, and you don't see DHS going around putting up lightning rods or handing out rubber boots or telling people not to stand by a tree in a rainstorm. So it's a little curious sometimes the way that the rhetoric gets spun. Now, what about the media? To me, the Eric Garner case and the Michael Brown case looked very, very different, but it got the same treatment from the media. Do you think that was fair to police officers?
Again, it depends on where you get your news from. The MSNBCs, the CNNs, they're obviously going to spin it anti-cop to the liberal side and, continue with their agenda. And, I'm no Fox News zealot by any means. They're, just one side of, the same coin. But I think they did a little bit better job in reporting the case. Bill O'Reilly, again, I'm not a huge fan, but he was fair in a lot of his reporting about it. And I think the main thing that was left out and, the focus of it, it was the type of crime. With the Eric Garner case, the guy's selling loose cigarettes, and it just goes to show how much our liberties have been eroded when you have a gang of cops going around trying to jam up some guy selling loose cigarettes. I mean, who cares? And at the end of the day, I guess we as Americans have been willing to give away our liberties and say that, we don't want a guy selling cigarettes on the corner because, that makes me feel, weird if I have to pass by him and he offers me to buy cigarettes. Just say no and move along. But, here in our culture, we have to have somebody else go down and take care of that guy because, I don't want to have to pass by him on my way to my apartment. With Michael Brown, it was very different. He, in essence, robbed a liquor store. He stole stuff, and when the clerk tried to take it back, he pushed and shoved him. So, technically you now have a robbery. But later he charged Darren Wilson. There's a struggle for the gun. So it's very different. But again, the media, for the most part, failed to discuss, the main issues here. In Ferguson, it's obviously a microcosm of the low-income black community as a whole. They've been completely degraded through welfare, the lack of fathers in their community. So these are just issues that are spun off from the main problem, which is, the breakdown of the family and the welfare state that exists there in that community.
Yeah, and when we look at those two cases where, yes, it probably was excessive force in Garner's case, but like you said, it's the legislation that's been put in place by the government that's pushed people to have to do that. And then I think that in New York, after the Garner case, I think there was a huge drop in enforcement of sort of petty crimes where a lot of cops just kind of like backed off and said, we're not going to enforce all of these silly rules as much. And there was a huge drop in arrests in the weeks after that. And now, like you said, in the Michael Brown case, this kid, we know from his behavior that was caught on camera that, he was just a thug, and he was a big kid. When you see him pushing that store clerk, he's towering over him, and you can see he's threatening to hit him, if he doesn't back down. And so the store clerk had to like sort of, shield himself and step away. And so, I don't have any problem believing Officer Wilson's account of that shooting. So I think that you're right, and I think that they just didn't do justice to Officer Wilson's side on that, and in the majority of the mainstream media. And I'll agree with you that Fox is, out of those three, they're kind of the cleanest dirty shirt. And yes, and I'm not at all a fan of O'Reilly after the conversation he had with Stuart Rhodes from Oath Keepers, telling him that the Constitution should be changed over a rain event, kind of like canceling a football game if it's raining too hard, Now,
yeah.
When we talk about that, when we talk about the way that most of the media treats officers, and the way that you sort of feel like you're getting this culture of being told that the public's sort of the enemy, do you feel like that there's some power out there that are trying to pit law enforcement and the public against each other?
I don't know if it's so much that they're trying to pit one against the other. I just think that it's, whatever powers that be are making it so the general public is just so indoctrinated to accept authority. I mean, local police, NSA, the CIA, DEA, ATF, any other acronym that you can think of that the government has created, the public doesn't even know about. The whole system, the whole mindset is against the general public. It's not the individual police officer. It's not the individual specific agency that the city or county is against that individual citizen. It's the way that the system has grown and become now that it's unchecked. I mean, so many citizens, 99%, have no clue really what goes on within a local police agency, let alone what goes on within, the ATF and the DEA, and what kind of surveillance, what kind of task force, what kind of crimes they're actually investigating. And that goes to speak of, terrorism classes that law enforcement have taken after 9/11. obviously that was the big buzzword. Those were a lot of government grants went to different police agencies for them to start getting trained up with terrorism stuff, because that's now the hot button. Well, a lot of those classes, they discuss terrorism, but a lot of local cops are like, well, what does this have to do with me? So they've cunningly spun it to, well, let's watch out for those sovereign citizens. If you see a Gadsden flag, if you come across a guy that, won't show you identification, talks about the Constitution, you might want to take a little extra care to, document that and submit that over to, whoever handles the terrorism watch list, etc. So local cops are less worried about Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the next 9/11. They've, been told more so to focus on domestic terrorism is what, they call it, which right now it's kept to the sovereign citizens and, skinheads and white power things. So the regular Joe cop is going to say, okay, yeah, I can understand. Those guys are a little bit out there. But all it takes is one quick policy change or one event to now make, you and me on that domestic terrorist list because, we own gold and silver, because we don't keep a lot of our money in the bank. We have guns. So that's something that the public really needs to keep an eye on and be aware of.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Katie Armor offers affordable body armor, including level 3 trauma plates made of AR-500 steel. They can endure multiple rounds from pistols and rifles up to 7.62 NATO. Their plates are available with Rhino Linings coatings to reduce SPA. Go to katiearmor.com, that's CATI armor.com today.
When disaster strikes, it's too late to prepare. PrepperRecon.com offers MOLLE-compatible individual first aid kits for your home, auto, or bug-out bag. These kits have everything you need to address a traumatic injury, including an Israeli battle dressing, quick clot, EMT shears, suture kit, Steri-strips, tourniquet, ACS chest seal, tough strip bandages, gauze, and so much more. $89 includes shipping. To buy your individual first aid kit, go to PrepperRecon.com and click the store tab at the top of the homepage. Order today before it's too late.
Well, as of last week, we had the DOJ encouraging tellers to call the local authorities if somebody tries to take more than $5,000 out of the bank. And, a lot of people buy cars for cash. And, what kind of car are you going to get for $5,000? It's going to have one wheel's missing a hubcap. It's one of the quarter panels got gray primer on it. And one window's got a duct tape garbage bag in it because it won't roll up.
It's funny you mentioned that because I took a large sum of cash out of the bank probably 2 days before that article hit the alternative news website. So I'm wouldn't be surprised if my name now showed up on some suspicious activity report.
Oh yeah, well that's standard, the suspicious activity report, and they're just getting thousands and thousands of these things. Mm-hmm. But now it's just they're just going to skip that and just call the cops.
Yeah, and all that takes is your name in a database. The NSA has got databases like I'm sure you understand, but people don't understand. They have information in every electronic aspect of your life. Your cell phone, your internet usage, your banking, your debit, credit cards. So all it takes is to link those electronic histories that may be different in your life. Your cell phone records may have nothing to do with your banking records, but as soon as you are frequenting certain websites on your cell phone, web browser, and then within a short time period you're withdrawing large amounts of money from cash, it would take just one NSA computer program to recognize that as suspicious, put those two together, and now you're on some terrorist watch list. And when it really hits the fan, who do you think they're going to come to first to start rounding people up?
Yep, and then that's why I always encourage people to start using Tor for your browser, start using Start Page for your search engine, and I've just recently gotten Start Mail for my email, and so my new email address is going to be prepperrecon@startmail.com from here on out. So yeah, we got to start doing what we can to at least, and most of these things are defeatable, but you got to at least make them work for it, because when you're on Gmail and you're on Facebook and Twitter and all of these things, you're just volunteering all of that information. Now, the federal government has the 1033 program, which supplies local law enforcement agencies with military hardware such as armored vehicles, grenade launchers, and helicopters. Does your department participate in that?
Yes, I work for a large agency, so we have all of the Wazoo gadgets. We have an MRAP helicopter, and then as far as small arms go, we have pretty much everything.
And now your neck of the woods is Southern California. I think that most people probably recognize that officers in your area couldn't really respond to threats with a 6-shot revolver. Barney Fife probably wouldn't last for maybe 5 minutes in your area. But where's the appropriate line for police militarization, in your opinion?
Mark, this is a hard question. The line is very fine, and I even teeter on this at times. Personally, I believe all patrol cops that are in a marked black and white unit on the streets every day, they should have an AR or something comparable mounted in their unit. I don't think they should sling it and carry it from call to call, but I think it should be available in their unit for an active shooter scenario, because the patrol cop who's passing by, the school or whatever, he's going to be the one closest to respond to a critical incident. It's not going to be the SWAT team who half the guys are off that day, the other half are at the department, in their, civilian clothes because they're detectives, et cetera, and they take, an hour to suit up and get out to the scene. Any legitimate incident is already done and gone. So I think SWAT teams are actually very unnecessary for individual departments. Certain counties, they'll do what's called a regional SWAT team. So, a bunch of local city police that aren't big enough to have their own SWAT team will have 1 or 2 guys that are on the SWAT team, and they'll go and join the regional team for training once a month. So I think that would be a good idea, because the regional teams could respond to barricaded subject calls where time is not critical, so they're available for those high risk, low frequency events. Plus it kind of decentralizes a SWAT team, so you couldn't all of a sudden just activate 10 SWAT teams from every single local police agency. It would just be one, which would take a little bit of power away from the local police force if there was it hits the fan scenario.
But if we only had one, we wouldn't be able to do 4 a.m. no-knock raids over traffic tickets.
Exactly. And then, how would we get our overtime?
Now, there's several small town agencies that have participated in the 1033 program and received up-armored vehicles. And in a lot of these places, the most violent crime on record was a drunken disorderly from 1997. Do you suspect that maybe the federal government could be using the 1033 program to pre-position equipment for some incident that they might be anticipating, like an economic collapse or something?
That is a possibility. I don't know why this is being done. It could also be, follow the money trail. It could also be that, the military is simply trying to get rid of stuff to make room for the next big government contract to be awarded to a defense contractor at inflated prices, because they've, given away all their quote unquote old technology, even though it's, perfectly usable in today's battlefield.
What's the water cooler conversations like in your department? Would your coworkers participate in a house-to-house gun confiscation?
You know, I wouldn't. A lot of the guys I work with are like-minded, but, who knows when it really hits the fan and the government's going to be the only one who's paying. I mean, you must remember in law enforcement, and certainly in California and definitely in a lot of other states, for the most part, we are fully reliant on the government for our salary, retirement, medical. Our job skills don't translate to the private sector very well. I mean, there are only so many mall security jobs that we could take if we walked away from law enforcement. Most don't pay anywhere near California law enforcement salaries. So I don't know what some would do if the only way to feed their family or, to pay the bills was to march goose step with whatever new directives came down from the top. There's going to be a line that, each individual cop has that he says he will not cross, but everybody's going to be different, and that line might change given how hard the times get. What one man said he wouldn't do, he may very well bend on to receive a paycheck or food or whatever it is they pay us with when it starts to unravel.
And if we had sort of that everything falls apart and there's no more currency, if we had one of those types of events, what percentage of the police do you think would have to stay home and take care of their own families?
A vast majority, whether it be for obvious personal reasons or another thing that people don't realize if you live in California and a major metropolitan area, many law enforcement officers, because of their different flexible schedules and things like that, we live a good distance away from where we work. Heck, I live in a different county from where I work, over about 45, 50 miles away. So if gas or whatever reason commuting is not feasible, that in and of itself will be a reason cops are no-shows, or at least a good excuse as to why I'm not going to come in. If there was some sort of critical event and things started to fall apart, and they emergency activate everybody to come in, I'll say, well, it's mildly amusing, Sarge, but guess what? My way of getting to work is no longer feasible, and I'm 45 miles away, so talk to you later.
And I live in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and on Martin Luther King Day, we had hundreds of dirt bikes and four-wheelers racing up and down I-95. And these vehicles had no tags, no headlights, and they're not even street legal. But the police just kind of had to stand aside because they were completely overrun. There's absolutely nothing they could really do about it without making the situation worse by chasing them around, which would be just more dangerous for everybody. And so in a sort of a collapse event or something like that, I can't imagine what the chaos would be like around here. Do you recommend that citizens be able to protect themselves?
Yes, unequivocally, yes, Mark. The agency I used to work for was a medium-sized city police, and we had on a regular weekday 10 to 12 cops for the day shift, and another 10 to 12 came in on swing shift, and we overlapped for a few hours. But noontime in a city of 150,000, there was 10 to 12 cops on the street. There was numerous times where we had an event occur that was localized, maybe a guy barricaded with a gun in his house, or something unusual occurred, but not enough to make the news, because we like to keep that stuff out of the news. We wouldn't want to scare the local citizens, but every unit was there at this call. There was maybe one or two available for any other calls in the city, and that's not even a apocalyptic type scenario. That's just a general hot call that comes out. If something good comes out on the radio, every cop is going to go that way, because it sounds cool, something to do, and that's just what you've been trained to do. So if every cop is in the south end of the city on a man barricaded with a gun call, and you live up in the north end and somebody's kicking in your door, stand by, because we're not coming, and if we are, it's going to be quite some time. So I always tell people that 911 is for the cop to come take the crime report after either you or the bad guy is dead. Because if you're dialing 911, someone's kicking in your door, we're not going to be there to stop the person kicking in your door. You need to do what you need to do to protect yourself within the law. And you know what? Even if it's not within the law and your life is on the line, we always say I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Yeah,
so, yes, true. Every citizen out there needs to have some means of personal protection, and obviously a firearm is what I would recommend. But if you're not comfortable with that, you're probably not listening to the show. But if you're not, find some sort of personal defense.
Good advice. Good advice. Yeah, I mean, it's unrealistic to expect the police to be able to protect you from crime. The only way that would be possible is if we had a guardian angel cop that was watching over our shoulder at every single minute. And I think for liberty issues, I think most of us would be opposed to that idea. So, yeah, great advice. Now, last week we had military urban warfare training here in Fort Lauderdale. And part of the exercise looked like training to round up civilians. Have you seen anything like that in your AO?
You know, in Southern California, they don't really do much of that. I think they do a lot of the training in a more sparsely populated areas. However, here in Southern California, we're so used to, you know, helicopters of all types flying around the city, and, you know, cops buzzing up and down the street with lights and sirens. So I think we're a little more acclimated to that sort of thing. I think they're testing it out in a little more of the rural areas and, you know, some of the medium populated areas, just to see how it's going to go over. I don't know how something like that would go over in California, or at least Southern California. I haven't seen anything like that as of yet, but I wouldn't be surprised that after we hang up, I, you know, get an email letting me know that there's going to be some sort of training here in the next month or so.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for your service. Thanks for honoring your oath, most of all. And thanks for making time to come on the show today.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. And, you know, if I hear of anything else, I'll have my ear to the ground, and I'll keep your listeners kept abreast of some of the things that they need to be aware of.
Thanks so much.
In the Days of Noah, Book 2, Persecution by best-selling author Mark Goodwin. A globalist conspiracy transpires by way of a false flag attack against America's energy infrastructure. Noah and Cassandra Parker witness a complete economic meltdown, which is intentionally triggered by the event. The assault is blamed on patriots and Christians who are rounded up into detention centers across the country. Noah and his friends must take action to prepare for the meltdown and defend against the totalitarian regime, which is gunning for their freedom and, quite possibly, their very lives. Get your copy of The Days of Noah, Book 2, Persecution for Kindle, paperback or audio edition at Amazon.com today.